There are a bunch of mistakes you're probably making in Dragons Dogma 2, one of them being you should actually let your food spoil. I'll tell you why and more tips and tricks and mistakes to avoid and other things in today's video, so let's go! Let me know any tips and tricks you've come across in the comments down below so we can help each other out. We'll start with upgrading correctly. As you may not know, but the upgrade equipment that you see at blacksmiths is actually different in any of the major locations. Great example of this being in Arbor, you'll notice that this is an Elven style, which focuses primarily on magic and magic defense when you upgrade, whereas Vernworth is like the Vermodian style, which is just like general across the board, will upgrade all the attributes. You can clearly see this in this example, upgrading the Black Matter Hammer, that doing this with the Elven style gives significantly less overall like physical attack compared to the Vermodian style, which is just like the default average across the board. So pay attention to this and actually use the right upgrade styles for the right weaponry, especially say if you're playing a mage or a sorcerer, you obviously want to upgrade in Arbor, and you don't really want to do that if you're using more of like a physical weapon base, because you want strength to be the main focus there, and it's not really going to get those benefits from being Elven style. So it's just something to pay attention to. Pro tip, with certain vendors, you can actually give them flowers and other gifts to get discounts from those items. So make sure you do that before you buy anything from them. Sometimes they won't like the items you give them, or they won't give you discounts, but if you get the item right and you get free discount. So why not do it? I will have a full video coming out with all the different blacksmith styles, where they're located, and which blacksmith style is good for each vocation. That'll be coming soon. I'll link that here once that's out. Next, anytime an NPC asks you for an item, before you give that item to them, you should see if you can actually make a fake of it, as most quests that I have come across that require you to give an NPC a specific item, if you create a forgery of it, there's often someone else that will actually want it as well. So there's a little bit of push and pull depending on which one you give, the real item or the fake item, or even just having that fake item or the forgery is a good idea just in case someone else does want one. Typically these quests, you'll know which ones it is. Like there is the sort of the tutorial, I guess, for this is the one that's in Checkpoint Rest Town, funnily enough, the same place where you find the forgery guy that will teach you about this sort of mechanic. But it's not just for this one quest that this mechanic exists, right? That there are other quests, like even the mage and the sorcerer maester quest does use this mechanic as well, and there are others out there that I'll let you discover on your own. But the main thing to consider is that if you see that pop up where you have to deliver something to someone, just think in the back of your mind, should you make a forgery of this? Is it possible to make a forgery of it? It's at least worth checking just in case it does come up again later. Pro tip, you can apply augments from any vocation that you have unlocked to any other vocation. So this is a really big thing to point out that you should be doing, right? As you unlock more vocations, and if you choose to level them up, which you should, when you unlock these augments, once you've unlocked them, you can put them on any other vocation. This is really good because some of them are beneficial to others, right? A great example of this, right, is that the Mage's Exaltation augment increases your stamina recovery speed, which like every class needs better stamina recovery speed. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Same as say if you're playing as a character that you want to avoid damage coming to you and being targeted by enemies, the Thief's Subtlety to decrease the likelihood of being targeted is great as well. Like learning any of these vocation augments and being able to mix and match them is really valuable to do. You should be doing this both for you and your main pawn, because your main pawn can do this exactly the same. And this is a really critical thing because it will help your main pawn stand out from the crowd. Speaking of that main pawn, they're not just there to like look pretty in the rifts. You should definitely be upgrading them and switching their vocation, having them learn the different vocations to gain those augments exactly the same as you. Really invest in your main pawn. Like I think this is something that's really important because you do want your pawn to be selected via other people on the rift, right? Because not only do you get, rewards from coming back as well as rift crystals and all that stuff, but they come back with knowledge, which can definitely help you. And you want to make sure that people are actually selecting them, right? So you can have this happen a couple of different ways. Like you can make it visually appealing, or, have like a good build set up, that sort of a thing, as well as good pawn quests. But the main focus on leveling them up really is because they are always going to be with you. So just don't ignore them, right? Like the other pawns, definitely ignore those summoned pawns, throw them off cliffs, do whatever. You don't necessarily need to worry about upgrading them. It's your main pawn is the one that you want to make sure that you're spending time on and upgrading. Now, speaking of selecting summoning pawns, don't just select them based on their vocation. You really want to look at their skills. You can look at their augments, like we've touched on that, but the main thing here is their skills, right? Like if you are looking at selecting augments, like say you want a fighter because you want them to be in melee range, it's a tank, that sort of setup, you want to make sure they actually have the skill that allows them to tank, like shield summon or shield drum, as it does upgrade to, right? In the same vein, if you're looking at mage pawns, you want to make sure they've got heals as well as the elemental imbue boons so they can actually buff your allies, because even if a pawn is the exact same level as another one, they're not all going to be the same, right? Obviously you can look at the inclinations, specializations, and all that stuff. I've got a full video that breaks all that down. I'll link that here. But if you're deciding what to pick, you really should be looking at the skills. Make sure they've got valuable skills that are actually going to be useful to you, rather than just picking a fighter vocation pawn, because that's essentially what you feel like you need in combat. Also, the first time you see this pop up, abandon that pawn immediately. They have the plague, and you can always check when you do summon pawns by checking their eyes after the fact. Failing quests absolutely sucks, and it does happen for a number of reasons. Maybe people die, maybe you don't complete a timed quest in enough time, but it does happen. Now, something I've seen amongst the community a few times is that the last save from in, that you shouldn't load that. Now, technically, like, that's not necessarily true, but it can be true, right? If you don't sleep in inns and you load that save and you lose like your autosave from wherever you last were, absolutely, that's a bad thing, right? Like you've just lost X amount of hours of game time. However, if you remember to rest in inns when you return to town, it is beneficial because you can essentially use this as like a save game you can go back to if you fail something or you get an outcome to a quest that you didn't necessarily want, right? Like it's a good habit to get into when you go to towns and be able to actually rest. Because of that, it'll update that save file. In case something bad happens, you can return to that rather than having to load that other save file, right? If you do own a house, it does also help as well. Like you can essentially update your in save from that as well. I'll link my video here that does cover exactly how to get a house, but essentially like it's just a thing to think about to make sure you are updating it and just not ignoring that, right? Because there is those two save types. Even though you can't load saves from the past, this is the only way you can do it. Ox cart fast traveling is definitely a way to get around, but it doesn't allow you to get exactly to where you want to go. Port crystals will. Now, you'll get a port crystal by completing the Trial of Archery quest for Gwendia in the Arbor region. You will have initially ran into him in the main square in Venworth. If you follow his quest line, at the end of that, you'll get a port crystal. This is amazing, right? Essentially, what this allows you to do is put a portable port crystal anywhere you like, and you can go back there at the cost of a fairy stone. Now, fairy stones are more common than you think they are. Basically, any traveling like vendor or even in capital cities, they will have fairy stones for you to buy for the cost of 10k gold. Now, they are expensive, so I wouldn't be buying them all the time. You can find them throughout the world as well. Like often they will be found in chests that pawns will point you towards. Like they'll be like, hey, we found a chest over here. You go there and you'll often find Wakestones or fairy stones. But essentially here, buying these when you do need them, or if you've got an abundance of gold, you can definitely do and should do. So you've got a couple available, and move your port crystal like wherever you feel like you're going to need to return to. For example, I have mine at Arbor because there's no ox cart that goes there, so I can return to Arbor whenever I need to do complete quests, etc. So I've got it there, and then you can pick it up if you want to move it to somewhere else. Like say you want to go to Malv, but there is an ox cart that goes there, but you can move it anyway, right? Now, spoiling your meat. I mentioned that spoiling your meat is a good thing, and it is a good thing because rotten meat and rotten hearthspan can be used to create lantern oil. Lantern oil is super critical because the night is dark and full of terrors, and so are caves. So you really should be letting your meat spoil so you can create lantern oil. You can buy lantern oil, but you know, you're going to have that rotten meat anyway, so you may as well actually use it for something valuable and actually create that lantern oil. A pro tip here is that food doesn't expire if you put it into your storage, so you can keep it forever there if you do want specific like food in that way. But for the most part here, like I've often just been balancing like letting certain food spoil so I can turn it into land oil, and then like keeping certain food as well for then actually using it at like cooking stations and stuff like that. And combining food into potions and dried fruits will like prevent them from expiring or extend their expiry time for like dried stuff as well. But it's just a thing to point out that if you run out of lantern oil, you are going to be in trouble, and just make sure you do turn off your lantern when you don't need it, as it will continue to use oil if you leave it on when you're just roaming out in the world. Hitting the right spot in combat is important, and you can tell if you're hitting the right spot, being the weak point, by a certain sound effect, as the hit sound is a little different when you're hitting the weak spot. generally speaking, you can tell where the weak points are, right? Certain creatures are super obvious. Some of them, like, it's just like the head, right? Like, it's pretty obvious when you are, but you'll hear that sound effect and you'll know that you're actually hitting the right spot there. For some vocations, this is much easier. The archer, for example, significantly easier to hit those right spots. Some of them, it's a bit harder. You might actually have to grab an enemy and climb them to hit that right spot, say melee characters, for example. But it's just something to focus on, as it does really help you in those tougher encounters for the bosses, enemies, and the tougher enemies, just to find those specific locations so you can actually hit them and deal more damage to them, take them down faster. I touched on it a tiny little bit earlier, speaking of the last in-save, but if NPCs die, you can revive them with Wakestones. So if you don't want to go back to saves, you can revive them with Wakestones. And I also kind of recommend to save your Wakestones specifically for this rather than saving yourself. Obviously, if you really need to use them for yourself, then do so, but reviving NPCs to complete quest lines and essentially like other reasons as well, which I won't go into, but a bunch of NPCs die and you need to bring them back, Wakestones are definitely the way to go. Whether you're finding Wakestone shards, converting them into Wakestones, or buying them at certain vendors, as they will occasionally pop up, then you really should be using them. So save them for NPCs rather than just for yourself if you do go down, right? Like, just go back to another save, try things in different ways, but save them for NPCs in my opinion. Now, bonus one here, we all know the microtransaction stuff sucks, but basically all the items are available in game, especially the item that allows you to change your appearance. I've seen so much misinformation about the fact that you have to buy this. You don't have to pay real money for this. It's just at the vendor, at the main Rift Crystal guy in the Venworth area. You can go there, buy one, go to the barber and change your appearance if you want to. But I just wanted to point out that all the items from the MTX are available in game. Like, we've already touched on the fairy stones and all that stuff anyway in Rift Crystals. So let me know any tips you have in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to the members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza and I hope you have a great day.